drive to vaccinate that number of people by December, because I mean we all have friends and contacts, and you hear them talk about, especially, there'll be a lot of IJJB influx this year. Trust, a lot of people are coming back. There seem to be shows are open again this year after 2 years of dryness.
Oh yeah.
People really want to hit December hard, so you can understand that from the states. Now, isn't it absolutely clear whether the 6,000 will be borne by the citizens? Right,
Yeah.
the government has just earmarked a sum of 6,000 to the private, hospitals. I didn't see. Yeah, yeah. Let's. I mean, the story doesn't say the people will be asked to pay.
Right.
Now, it is so to me. In summary, it is. If that's the case, then it is good, because what it is doing is increasing access.
Yeah.
Right. The Lagos State government says that it spends 350K a day at its own facilities.
Yeah.
Right. Can it spend some of that in private? Take for instance, when so I'm double jabbed now.
Yeah.
So I went onto the site to decide, pick a center, right?
Yeah.
And I had the option of a center that was closer to home, but I was worried that it was going to be that's probably was going to be not as organized or a bit rowdy. So I chose one that's in a military installation, because the thinking is that it would be orderly. People would not want, a lot of people won't choose it. And if you misbehave, you're worried about doing frog jumps and all of that. So,
That's wise, actually.
so you think about the permutations in deciding, one, on taking the vaccine, two, where to take the vaccine. But in the interim and in the intervening period, I've been to my private hospital multiple times, for different reasons, right? Imagine if it was available then there. Also, the opportunity to even ask, questions, in the private hospital, a lot more, there's a bit more customer centricity. You can ask
Tunde,
questions
I
a
think
bit
you're
more.
speaking to the private hospital that you go to, so the higher end private hospitals. Because remember, the private hospitals in Nigeria are not reflective. I mean, the ones in VI and Ikoyi are not reflective of the ones, the majority.
True.
That's one. Number two, so because I want you to answer this. So, at what cost is the deployment of a single or double dose vaccine to the individual by a private facility? Bearing in mind, as at least for now, we don't buy these vaccines.
True.
Most of them
Yeah,
are
they're
given
free.
to us
No,
free.
no,
So why
they're
do we
free.
have to pay for something
Absolutely.
that is given? Is it okay?
No.
If we say okay, administration fee, are you saying the
Exactly.
administration fee to administer 2 doses of vaccine to an individual is 6,000
Well,
naira?
actually, tell me, what's 6K in USD now?
Now it's probably just about $10, $9. Yeah.
So to be
it's
honest,
not
right?
unrealistic.
So the cost, exactly. The cost isn't for the vaccine. The vaccines have been donated. I mean, we had this conversation now where handouts, they've given us. But now you're asking this to be administered at private institutions. You have to pay and cover the admin costs, right? And I don't know, probably what would have been maybe what they could have done is to sort of normalize price across the state. Say, okay, the cost of administration in VI, Lekki, Surulere, wherever, it would be different from maybe Ikorodu, because cost of labor and the cost of running is a bit different. But then that probably makes it a bit more complicated and complex. So they've normalized it.
Cost of testing is different now. So
Well, it
Ogun
is.
State
Yeah, it's different
Lagos.
from Lagos.
Yes,
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
cheaper.
it's cheaper.
It's
It's
cheaper
about
there.
25 or so in Ogun State. I
Okay,
believe.
but I just want to get to this point about how you aggressively vaccinate the population, and I don't know why we're acting like we haven't done this before in this country. We have rolled out very aggressive vaccination programs. You do it in stadiums, you do it in large open areas, you do it in schools and everything else, and you ensure that you have a gigantic PR machine around the benefits of you getting to do the vaccinations. I remember back in the 80s, during sanitation day, they allocate sanitation day to a vaccination day. Come to National Stadium to get your whatever vaccine it was, whatever the case may be. So the playbook is there to do it. And all these things that we're having conversations about is actually just mind-boggling to me, because if you really want to vaccinate the population, you can do it. Just declare a particular date, come to the stadium, set it up, make sure it's orderly. Yes, you probably spend about a few hours to do it, but at least the people who want to do it will do it. So I'm not quite convinced of the strategy.
They can do this. They can do those drives, which is, but one key thing between then and now, population explosion, we're a lot more than we used to. They can still do some of that, but I think this, in any case, it complements
Okay.
right? You know,
But then
there
at the
is
foundation level, they're not even doing that.
yeah, they're not. I
Right.
agree. There's a lot more they can do,
Right.
but I think
And
there's
something
complements,
else
which is
is
okay.
that Tunde, people who would pay 6,000 naira to get vaccinated have probably
Thank
already
you.
been
I,
vaccinated.
no doubt, true that.
So it's those who cannot afford it that they
And
need
even
to be
those who
focused.
can't afford it is a very, very small percentage.
True.
Yes.
Again, I don't think they're calling for the individuals to pay, right? They're seeing the cost of them getting it done
Wait,
at private
I,
hospitals.
I doubt it
Right.
very much. If a profit, a hospital is set up for profit.
No, but they do this already. You realize, yeah. These are not the first vaccines that are donated to us. The vaccines are given to us for a bunch of reasons, right? There are ones. So each country has its list of vaccinations and say, okay, this must be given. Some of those vaccinations the private hospitals receive from the government,
Yeah.
and they administer them for
True.
free.
True.
You know, so
All
they
right.
don't ask the people coming in to get them to the kids that are being vaccinated,
Yeah.
right? Because the government is covering that cost.
Okay, Fabian from my pet says, good morning. Concerning vaccination, the move to put 6,000 naira for the private hospitals will further increase vaccine hesitancy. Consider the level of test results when government started charging for COVID tests. In America, to give an example, you can enter into a pharmacy to get vaccinated at no cost. Let's stop putting costs at every opportunity.
Making a huge assumption that the government is asking the citizenry to pay.
So I think there needs to be
Stated.
clarity on that statement
Yes,
then, because
then-
that's where the issue is.
Because I don't know why they'll tell us the amount of money
Right.
if they're not expecting us
And
to
I
pay
think
for it.
further to
They're
that
just
point,
letting you know how much they're spending on your.
no, but Tunde, further to that point, some hospitals can now misconstrue that to say, well, the government has said it's 6,000 naira, so we're going to go ahead and charge 6,000 naira.
Yeah.
Yeah, you will always find that.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next story. NSCDC deploys 20,000 personnel for Anambra governorship poll. Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps has deployed that number of personnel to provide security for the November 6th governorship election in Anambra. I'll just end here and let me hear your thoughts on this, Waji.
Well, we all know what's going on in the southeast, and this is a hot state, especially with all the issues around IPOB and the stay-at-home orders that have been in place for a few months now, where it pretty much stalled a lot of movement and activity in that region of Nigeria. So when you now begin to combine that with an election that's coming in, pretty much to bring in a new era of governorship that could actually transcend the region and that state, is going to be a hotly contested election, especially when you now begin to look at all the characters who are vying for that seat. Some very interesting individuals. So what NSCDC is doing is just trying to say that we have to at least have some level of security and presence. Interestingly enough, I do actually like what they do. I like how they go about the way that they handle security. It does have a very civil approach. They don't have a high-handed attitude sometimes, and they're also very engaging, even though they do have the capacity to take care of security situations when they find themselves. So I think it's a welcome thing, and I think it's important that security is at the utmost of the conversation. 20,000 is a lot. There have been warnings that they should not abuse that security situation. These individuals will be dealt with. That's the NSCDC themselves. So Anambra is going to be a very, very interesting turning point. It's coming up, I think, next week.
Yeah, next week Saturday.
Next week Saturday, thank you, November 6th. And this is just this particular agency letting us know that they're ready to deploy people from that particular region, the southeast, the south, and some other contributing states to make sure that these elections go on without any issues, and if the issues do arise, that the people are there to respond. And I think it's a very powerful statement to make, to give people the reassurance that there will be security, because by giving people that reassurance that there will be security, it encourages people to come out and vote. People coming out to vote actually influences policy and influences security furthermore in that particular region, because it's high time, especially in Anambra, that there is some control around what is happening with the state of security going on in that particular region. So I welcome it. I encourage it. Let's hope that it goes up without a hitch. Let's hope that people stay safe, and let's hope that people get their rights to exercise their democratic process.
You know, one of the challenges or concerns for the citizens in Anambra is the IPOB order.
Of course,
Yeah.
the stay-at-home
Stay
order.
at home.
So you know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see there's one stay-at-home order before the actual one, before the election. I'd like to see how the security operatives would handle that, because if the people don't see that they can be looked at and protected, they won't come out.
And that's a very interesting point that you brought up, and I think you are going to see some changes. IPOB are very smart; they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think the results of the election would influence that. And I think they also know that after that election, once the results are, they cannot possibly sustain the stay-at-home order. I think a lot of the politicians and government in that region are just indulging IPOB for now because they don't want to, quote unquote, hurt their chances at the polls. So maybe that's why they're just tolerating that stay-at-home order. But once the elections are announced that you have a new government, it's not going to be possible to continue that, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, we'll see. Because I mean, really, and truly, like I said, the government, what the people respond to on the ground is the authority.
I understand, my point is, but the government ultimately, if they decide to shut it down, they will. They're tolerating it because elections are coming up and they don't want anything to hurt their chances. So once that is announced, we'll see. Yeah.
We'll see. All right, only a few more days, one more week to go for the elections. All right, Tunde, let's come to another week, another strike ultimatum. Premium Times reports strike looms in varsities as SANU, that's the, let me look for the full meaning of SANU now, because they know, that's, okay, so, that's the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities. And NASU, another one, that's the Non-Academic Staff Unions of Education and Associated Institutions, have given the federal government an ultimatum over earned allowances. So they've issued a joint statement saying, refusal of federal government to honor memorandum of action. There's a big challenge with government promises, trust, and this is based on experiences like this, where they go to the negotiation table, come to an agreement, and then they they don't carry out the agreement, and now they're threatening another strike. What do you have to say about this?
Okay. So this is another Groundhog Day story. Certain things just stand Nigeria out. We have certain characteristics, poor lights, issues in the education sector, strikes, especially in the education sector. Now, here's another one. The detail of this is, like you rightly mentioned, the government makes promises, they sign a memorandum of understanding, and it isn't honored. This is slightly different in this instance. This is not to exonerate them, and the delivery of this 22.1 billion is definitely clearly by going by the stories behind whether it's late is everything. But the argument here is now one that is internal to the unions, right? So each university, academic unions are different from the non-academic unions. Now 22.1 billion has been released, and it has been indicated, so the arguments around the sharing formula, it's been indicated that it will be shared 75-25, 75 to the academic and 25 to the non-academic, and the non-academic staff are up in arms, saying, why would 75% be allocated to the academic staff? I think this is one of those, it should be a very simple conversation, a simple analysis. If you represent 25% of the overall, or your wages, whatever is due to you, represents a certain amount, then it's empirical, right? It's not a question of this is what I want. We're not debating here like I deserve the head of the fish or I want the tail. It's empirical. So we shouldn't be having those kind of debates and those kind of arguments. But you see why we arrive here is when a group or people are so abused, so deprived, right, that when you do throw, this is like throwing red meat at them, when you do throw something in, suddenly there's money to be shared. And everybody loses all their, all their sensibilities, and they're arguing and squabbling over this. It's very unfortunate. I feel for them. These are months and months of unpaid salaries, benefits, allowances. How have we expected them to survive? And somehow, magically, we expect the country to produce quality, graduates. They've taken out almost all decency in working in education, literally at almost every level, but especially at university level, in the public schools. So it's no surprise that you don't find the very best, or you don't find a lot of quality teaching and grooming the next the next line and the next generation. But that's what it is. So it's an argument. They're threatening to go on strike in 2 weeks. They've given the government an ultimatum, which is funny. Has this government ever responded well to any ultimatums?
Never.
So we'll see.
All right, thank you. Waji, despite weekly killings, Nigeria's police chief says security significantly stabilized. Despite the rampant killings across the country, the Inspector General of Police, Usman Al-Khali, has said security has significantly stabilized. He said the police force under his leadership is doing its best to sustain peaceful coexistence in the country.
Yeah, I don't know why they feel the need to make these statements around security. The evidence is evidence. You cannot hide behind things that are statistically in your face. I understand that maybe the essence of it is trying to promote some kind of narrative that we have security under control.
Yeah.
We are doing what we can. We're working with various agencies. We're working across different intelligence units to be able to ensure that Nigeria is secure. And vis-a-vis, we've done maybe one or two, three things out of 100 things. So therefore, in as much as we continue to see weekly killings, we've seen 200 killings over the past 10 days. But things have stabilized because we are putting our best foot forward and effort towards it. But you can just simply say that we have put everything in place from a mechanism point of view, and we're working very hard to make sure that we stabilize security in the country. You don't need to come out and make declarative statements because it doesn't actually make any sense, nor is it true. And this is the big, gigantic problem we have in Nigeria with how do you now ensure you wrap around some kind of PR machine in sensitive areas around security. And that is a big challenge. You can own the narrative, you can control the story. There are many things that you can do. Let me just give a classic example to this particular point. You're talking about stabilizing security where people are getting killed on a weekly basis and it's actually problematic. But then you have Nigerians exercise or wanting to exercise their democratic rights to protest. And if you saw the security presence at the Lekki toll gate, you now begin to ask yourself, what is it that we are missing?
So they have the tools.
They have the tools. I mean, when I drove past there for like about 2 or 3 days, I was like, wow, we actually have this kind of hardware.
Yeah.
We actually have this kind of system set up, and this is for a protest, not criminal activity. So my point is, who is handling PR? All these things are around messaging. You can do so much, even just the presence. I remember a few years ago at the Ijara Causeway, when there was a lot of robbery around that area. What they did was to put up like these stadium lights to light up that area. And once they did that, security reduced significantly. There's so many things that you can do just from a deterrence point of view, from a positioning point of view, to now begin to even give people the confidence that you're on top of it. Not coming out and making declarative statements, not coming out and saying security has stabilized when people know that it hasn't. So what always worries me is, where is the PR machinery around this? Where is the thinking around how do we now begin to take control of this narrative? It's no longer about just talking things into existence. You actually have to put truth to power and speak it.
Absolutely.
Quickly for me, it's in the headline. He hasn't said security has improved or we brought down the crime rate. It is stabilized. So the question is, what is an acceptable,
So
level for us?
you're going
They're
from
weekly
gushing,
killings, but it's stable.
It's
guys.
stable.
Yeah, it's stable.
Okay, so this is our reality.
No, so basically, so as opposed to the numbers spiking, they've just
It's just
stabilized.
stable. It may be stable at 1,000, but it's stable.
For the past 2 weeks.
Right, so Princess, personally, I would prefer to be vaccinated at a private health center because the crowd at the government vaccination centers around me is too much. And I've tried 4 times.
There you go.
That's
You know,
options.
Yeah. And then Christian says, how will the government shut down the stay-at-home order? It will go drag people out of their houses. Truth is that a lot of people are sympathetic to IPOB, hence the success of this stay-at-home order.
No, let's correct that. The stay-at-home order is an IPOP directive that people are afraid of.
Yeah.
So that response about dragging people out of their homes, no, that's not the approach. The approach is you eradicate that order to begin with and let people know that they can actually come out safely. If they choose to stay at home, that's fine.
Yeah.
But what I'm referring to is eradicating the order.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'll come to you now, Tunde. Presidential Clinic increases State House 2022 budget to 40 billion naira. There's a plan for the construction of a 14-bed presidential clinic at the State House, Abuja, and it increased the budget for 2022 to 40 billion naira. Now, they say that it's not just going to be for the construction of the building itself, but for grade A medical equipment, laboratory, healing garden, pharmacy, X-ray facilities, and that it wasn't conceived by this administration. It was actually conceived by the previous administration in 2012. Today, your thoughts? At least for me, I think maybe we'll reduce flight tickets and flight expenses.
Another groundhog day story. Because I can't count the number of times. I mean, it's budgeting time,
Cover the
right?
story.
Yeah, it's budgeting time, it's budgeting season. So
Session
these
gets
are one of the things that pop up perennially. I mean, look, really, the fact that they say, "Oh, this wasn't something else conceptualized or conceived in this administration," and they've had how many years, and they've made how many budgets, and they haven't gotten it, in place. The only reason why this is coming up again, because it's once again time to allocate some money, with no accountability as to how the previous budgeted sums were spent. No accountability. Once more, it's 40 billion. If it is that, oh, we've started a project, there's creep, things have changed, we need more. This is like still essentially nothing. But let's look on the bright side, as because that's hope is always very often what we have. So we hope that when they do put this in place, it will reduce the medical tourism that the leadership of the country has to embark upon to do routine checkups.
Well, if we go by what's happened in the past, in Akwa Ibom, they built a state-of-the-art, world-class hospital, yet the governor and some of the leadership still go abroad. Is it that we can't...
The motivations are different. The motivations of going abroad are entirely different, regardless of... It would be great, you're right, like if they were to use the facilities in Akwa Ibom. Now, at the time it was launched, very grand, very beautiful. But very often, we don't sustain and maintain things. It would be nice if someone were to go and see the state of it now. Have they been to? So it's one thing to have a facility, but are you able to attract the best medical minds there? Do you have the right equipment? Are the equipment, still functional?
Do we have people who can use
it? So it's a lot more than just building an edifice, right?
All right, thank you very much. All right, Waji, government workers future shaky as 20 states shown contributory pension scheme continues with we had a conversation earlier this week around on pension, and the PENCOM saying they're going to go after defaulting organizations who hadn't paid pension or remitted pension of staff despite deducting. And a big thing that came up was that, in fact, some of the biggest defaulters are government organizations, right. And that's why this headline is really important. So we had that no fewer than 20 states out of 36 states have yet to commence the payment of pensions to retirees after opting to join the contributory pension scheme. Investigations from the Punch correspondents have revealed. What do you think about this?
I mean, it's really sad. And when you now begin to think about these strides that have been made since the Pension Reform Act of 2004, that we have state governments that are continuing to fail in this contribution scheme is really, really disheartening. Especially when you now see retirees who are queuing to collect their money, and in some cases, some of them dying without collecting their pensions. And you can just imagine how that's disheartening, not only for the individual, but for the people they've left behind. But I think for me, this goes back to the democratic process and people within those states ensuring that you vote for people that take these things more seriously. If individuals can campaign on platforms that will indicate that within those states, because unfortunately, you rest with those states is not something the federal government can do per se. So those states need to take these things seriously, because when you look at the states that are actually contributing towards the scheme, it's only 5. Lagos, Osun, Kaduna, Delta, and the FCT. The rest are just, they've enacted the laws to ensure that it's happening. Yeah. So what they're doing is deducting it from the individual salaries, but not making those contributions. Yeah. So I think exposing these states, that like this article has done through the Punch, is very important. And hopefully that will now prompt them to actually begin to do the right thing. If PENCOM can come out with some more, tough positions on what they're going to do to these organizations, especially government organizations, to ensure that they adhere to this particular law, because it is a law. Then people just need to behave better, because that's essentially what it is. It's not as if they don't have the money; they're just not setting up to make the services which they need to do.
Absolutely, thank you very much indeed. Just to mention that some of the defaulting states, since we're naming and shaming, who have.
I've mentioned the 5 that do so.
That do, okay, so the rest of
them.
The rest, man. I think it's easier to mention those that are doing.
Right. And people wonder why the citizenry have little faith in these schemes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes, someone just said that PenCom is a scam. Cisco Delgado said that. Ty Fumaja says, I'm not optimistic about presidential clinic. It doesn't stop PMB from medical tourism. Congrats to Konjo Riala's son pushing medical frontiers in Maryland of the abroad. I thought that was good to mention. Dr. Iriala, he was part
They
of
use
a
robotics,
team,
yeah,
yeah.
that a spinal surgery. Brilliant.
It just goes to show that Nigerians are brilliant as
Yes.
individuals. We are in the forefront of many of cutting edge fields and industry. It's as a collective we haven't figured it out. When two or more Nigerians are gathered, that's when problems start.
Well, there are two or more Nigerians. Okay, Tunde, we need 30
Tunde is not Nigerian.
Well, believe me, and you are two or more.
Through and through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so the Ogun State Governor, Dapo Abiodun, on Thursday said about 13 billion naira was needed to fix the failed portions of the Lagos-Ota, Abeokuta Road in Songota, Ado, Odo, local government area. This comes to light following the protest by a number of people on that road. He said that, he's surprised that they came out to protest since they were at the meeting the previous week where he mentioned that they needed funding was the issue.
Yeah, it's true. He's not the first person to say that he's surprised that he came out to protest. And some people have said, this statement, and it's easy to construe that perhaps, a rented crowd, potentially, to make this case, see the people in the States are protesting. I don't know why they're out here protesting. But meanwhile, can we go and borrow money on behalf of the federal government to fix the road? See where it's coming, because this is a federal road, it's under the remit of the Ministry of Works, and the governor is saying, my people are protesting. It is a case, therefore, for me to go and borrow money on your behalf. A bunch of questions come out here in like, the costing, all sorts of things. But it's good. Service should be given to the people.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this is inflated or more expensive than federal governments have done it. It needs to get done. So.
Absolutely. All right. I'll just end with this last story here. ICPC recovering 301 houses from two human beings.
How many places can you live in? Yeah.
301.
And the only reason why they were able to discover it is because those properties are completely empty, as in no activity in or out.
Do you know how many empty properties we have in Lagos State? If you go to, just come to the island, I don't know
But
what.
Abuja is worse. That's the point.
So when they recover, what they do, they should turn them to public housing.
Yeah, or auction them off or something.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Dapo, on YouTube, and to all our listeners as well. Comments coming in. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I have to say a big thank you to our fantastic analysts. Thank you, Tunde Okufi at Big Coops on social media, and thank you very much, Waji. Waji is at the Corporate MC on social media. Corporate is with a K. We are at Smooth 981, and in a few minutes we'll be going into Lagos Talks 981. But today is a Feel Good Friday edition, so if you were planning to call to respond to any of the stories, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I assure you of a very good conversation to usher us into the weekend in a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
That 300, are they mad?
It's like really, like how unfair. Like how unfair.
Why are you guys shocked?
Like